Another popular option for black is to play knight f6, developing a piece and controlling the e4 and d5 central squares. White's most popular response is to grab more space with c4. If black wants to enter a Benoni structure, then black will strike in the center with c5, attacking the d4 pawn. White's most challenging response is to grab space with d5. Gaining a central space advantage, black has an important decision to make. How exactly should black challenge white's space advantage? One idea is to play e6, turning the game into the modern Benoni, which is the subject of another video. We reached the Benko Gambit after the signature move b5. We have now reached the Benko Gambit, named after the Hungarian-American Grandmaster Paul Benko. Black immediately challenges the c4 pawn, the key defender of d5. Let's begin to understand the basic ideas behind this gambit by exploring the main lines after c takes b5. White accepts the b5 pawn, and black offers another pawn with a6. After b takes a6, instead of capturing the a6 pawn immediately, a popular option is to first play g6, preparing to take control of the long dark square diagonal with bishop g7, exerting long-term pressure against white's queenside. White's most straightforward response is knight c3. When white threatens to play e4, taking control of the center, as well as opening up the light-squared bishop, this is a good moment to play bishop takes a6, regaining one of the pawns, but black still remains a pawn down. What exactly is the idea behind this gambit? Like many gambits, in exchange for the pawn, black enjoys a lead in development. The bishop on a6 exerts pressure down the f1 to a6 diagonal, so if white plays e4, then black can disrupt white's development with bishop takes f1. Thanks to gambiting the a-pawn, black's rook on a8 enjoys an active file, preparing long-term pressure down the a-file. Since black has also opened up the b-file, after castling kingside, the rook on h8 will often move to b8, joining the other rook and adding pressure down the a and b files. By removing the c4 pawn, white's d5 pawn is more sensitive to attack and is a long-term target for black. Now it's white's turn to make an important decision: how to complete kingside development. The most direct response is to take space in the center with e4, supporting the d5 pawn, as well as revealing tension between the light-squared bishops. So this allows black to exchange light-squared bishops with bishop takes f1, king takes f1, preventing white from castling, as well as opening up the a-file for black's rook. After trading bishops, black usually prevents any future e5 and d6 ideas by playing d6, locking the d5 pawn in its place. That being said, white still dreams of achieving a favorable e4 to e5 pawn break. You may wonder if white should willingly enter this line, as the king on f1 does look a bit strange. Many grandmasters choose this path as white from time to time, which is known as the king walk variation. The variation lives up to its name after g3. White is preparing to castle by hand, walking the king to g2, often followed by moving the rook to e1, preparing the e5 pawn break. Both sides typically continue to develop with bishop g7, activating the bishop on the long diagonal, a key piece that not only helps defend the king, but it also creates long-term pressure against white's queenside dark squares. White's king completes its kingside stroll with king g2, when black's king chooses a more direct path by castling. Both sides now develop their knights to sensible squares with knight f3 and knight b to d7. Black's pawn chain from e7 to c5 points toward the queenside, and it's no surprise that a common setup for black is to play queen a5, followed by rook f to b8, creating heavy major piece pressure on the queenside. Since black has incredible pressure on the queenside, white will often seek to open lines in the center, as well as the kingside, especially with e4 to e5, opening up lines and disrupting black's central pawn chain. One idea is to play rook e1, preparing e5, but black can create interesting complications with knight g4, discouraging e5, as well as opening up the dark-squared bishop. Since knight g4 can often be a useful idea for black, one idea is to prevent this move with h3, preventing knight g4, so this helps white prepare rook e1 and e5. When in doubt in the Benko Gambit, in most positions, black can create counterplay with queen a5 and rook f to b8. This position is no exception, but an interesting idea is the rook lift rook a6. This move supports the 6th rank and prepares to meet rook e1 with queen a8, aligning the queen on the same diagonal as the enemy king. So opening up the diagonal with e5 may not be a wise decision. One sample line is queen c2, reinforcing the e4 pawn as well as the knight on c3. Now that the queen is out of the way, a natural response is rook f to b8, increasing pressure down the queen side. Grandmaster Pavel Tregobov, an experienced Benko Gambit player, decided to first play knight b6. This knight on b6 is a very flexible piece. From b6 it adds pressure against d5. It sometimes jumps into the c4 square, adding pressure against the b2 pawn, especially in conjunction with the dark-squared bishop. Another popular idea is to offer a trade of knights with knight a4, trying to soften up squares on the queen side for black's major pieces to pressure. We'll see another possible point behind this move in a moment. His opponent, Grandmaster Pavel Elyanov, reinforced the queen side with rook e2. Supporting the 2nd rank, anticipating long-term pressure against the b2 and a2 pawns. Black continued with the thematic rook b8. Black's pieces have a magnetic attraction toward the queen side, preparing long-term positional pressure. White's rook on a1 is usually uncomfortable being under the constant watch of black's dark-squared bishop on the long diagonal, so a typical response is rook b1. This rook also escapes the pressure on the a-file at the expense of removing a protector of the a2 pawn. Another reason black plays knight b6 is to allow the kingside knight to utilize the d7 square with knight f to d7, revealing the dark-squared bishop's pressure down the long diagonal. Black's pawn on c5 does an excellent job restraining b4, making it more challenging for white to activate the queen side. So an important positional threat white must keep in mind is c4, clamping down on the light squares. If c4 is allowed, black can play knight c5, making it difficult for the b2 pawn to advance, while also eyeing the juicy d3 square. White anticipates this possibility by playing b3, adding protection to the c4 square, while also revealing the queen and rook's protection of the a2 pawn. In this typical Benko position, black has several ideas, including activating the knight with knight e5, play as Grandmaster Tregobov did with rook c8, which ultimately resulted in a draw. But black should be in no rush to regain the pawn with bishop takes c3. Giving up your dark-squared bishop in the Benko is a decision that never should be made lightly, as it is an excellent source of queenside counterplay, and it also helps keep the king secure. White now allows black to enter a series of exchanges with queen takes c3, rook takes a2, rook takes a2, and queen takes a2. Black has regained the pawn for the moment, but must now pay the price for weakened dark squares after bishop b2. Threatening queen g7 checkmate. Black can block the long diagonal with f6,